On 5 News tonight, a day of history as the UK quits Europe and David Cameron quits as Prime Minister. We're live in Westminster for this special programme. It's UK Out, what it means for you. The Prime Minister says he will step down by October after the UK voted to leave the EU.
I love this country and I feel honoured to have served it. And I will do everything I can in future to help this great country succeed.
The man widely tipped to be the next Prime Minister says Britain now has a glorious opportunity.
I believe the British people have spoken up for democracy in Britain and across Europe.
We've got our country back!
Nigel Farage hails the vote as a victory for real people.
June the 23rd needs to become a national bank holiday, and we will call it Independence Day. Thank you.
Across the United Kingdom and the rest of the continent, the repercussions are being felt. Scotland voted overwhelmingly to stay in Europe. Nicola Sturgeon confirms she is drawing up plans for a second independence referendum. And billions are wiped off the value of Britain's top companies. We'll find out what it all means for our pensions, our mortgages, our holidays, our future in this new world. Good evening, I'm Matt Barber. This is a special programme live from Westminster on a day that history has been made and Britain's future has been transformed. The UK has voted to leave the European Union. It's a momentous decision which could change so much, and those changes have already begun. David Cameron resigned this morning, saying it is now time for a fresh leadership. Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage have hailed a new dawn and a glorious opportunity, but it has sparked economic turmoil and the prospect of the breakup of the United Kingdom. And this is why 17.4 million people, or 51.9%, voted in favour of leave. 16.1 million people voted remain. That's a 48.1% share. Leave's victory, more than 1.2 million votes. Tonight we'll look at what happens next. But first, here's our political editor, Andy Bell.
He decided to call this referendum. He decided Britain should stay in. But the voters have decided the country should leave. And now he has had to accept the consequences.
I will do everything I can as Prime Minister to steady the ship over the coming weeks and months. But I do not think it would be right for me to try to be the captain that steers our country to its next destination. This is not a decision I've taken lightly, but I do believe it's in the national interest to have a period of stability and then the new leadership required.
It was clearly an emotional moment for his wife Samantha, and by the end, for him too.
I love this country and I feel honoured to have served it. And I will do everything I can in future to help this great country succeed. Thank you very much.
He took a gamble and he's lost. Now he's recognised reality and he's going.
They booed the man who may be taking over. Boris Johnson's become the standard bearer of the now triumphant Leave campaign. But today he was playing the statesman and praising the man he beat.
How sad I am that he has decided to step down, but obviously I respect that decision. I've known David Cameron for a very long time, and I believe he's been one of the most extraordinary politicians of our age.
But he said the voters had reached the correct verdict.
There is simply no need in the 21st century to be part of a federal system of government based in Brussels that is imitated nowhere else on earth. It was a noble idea for its time. It is no longer right for this country.
The total number of votes cast in favour of leave was 82,000.
Early hopes of a Remain win soon faded, and through the night the results kept coming in, showing that Leave had pulled ahead. By the early hours of the morning, the man who lit this fuse 20 years ago was jubilant.
So we need, as I say, a Brexit government. We need the negotiations to start as soon as humanly possible. We need to start thinking globally about our future. And the other thing I think that needs to happen is that June the 23rd needs to become a national bank holiday, and we will call it Independence Day. Thank you.
As if there isn't enough going on, Labour MPs have put down a vote of no confidence in Jeremy Corbyn, saying their leader didn't work hard enough for a Remain vote.
I campaigned the length and breadth of this country on a party position which was that we should support remaining in Europe, recognising the many deficiencies of the European Union in order to reform it.
They were changing the guard at Buckingham Palace, appropriately enough, as David Cameron told the Queen of his plans. He leaves a country that's heading out of the EU, and possibly Scotland leaving the UK after another referendum. Hardly the legacy he wanted. Andy Bell, 5 News.
The results have shown that the United Kingdom is anything but united. Every region of Scotland, in fact, voted to remain. And today, First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said her country is being taken out of the EU against its will, and a second referendum on independence is highly likely. So would people in Scotland vote differently this time around? Simon Viger has been to Edinburgh to find out.
Britain voted leave, Scotland did not. This morning, its First Minister said she would demand a second independence referendum to avoid being caught up in Brexit.
Scotland does now face that prospect. It is a significant and material change in circumstances, and it is therefore a statement of the obvious that the option of a second referendum must be on the table, and it is on the table.
44,987.
On the ballot papers, 62% of Scotland voted to remain in the EU. Many people really don't want yet another referendum, but for some, it is a must.
I would be happy to be part of Europe. I'm not happy to be part of the UK, so I'm happy to vote to leave.
And that's a change on your vote from 2 years ago?
Definitely, and not just mine, my entire family.
Definitely, I think that the Scottish nation have not been represented well in the Brexit campaign. I just think that we're going to have to leave.
Another referendum is on the cards, and flanked by the flags of Europe and Scotland, the First Minister had this message to EU migrants.
I want to take the opportunity this morning to speak directly to citizens of other European countries living here in Scotland. You remain welcome here. Scotland is your home, and your contribution is valued.
The United Kingdom just became less united again, and there's only one way the leadership here is looking. Simon Viger, 5 News, Edinburgh.
It's not just Scotland's future being discussed either. The leader of Sinn Féin has called for a referendum on Irish unity. Northern Ireland as a whole voted to remain. Martin McGuinness says the British government no longer has a democratic mandate to represent the views of the people there. He says they should now be able to choose whether to leave the United Kingdom.
This is an unacceptable situation for us to find ourselves in against the backdrop of a vote which was in favour of Remain in the north. And for us to be dragged out of the European Union against our will is absolutely unacceptable.
Andy, simply an incredible day, but what happens next?
Well, strangely enough, the first thing that Boris Johnson said today was, let's not rush anything, let's not do anything in haste. And he was thinking in particular about something called Article 50 of the Lisbon Treaty, which basically allows for, if a country is leaving the EU, and remember this has never happened before, but if a country is leaving the EU, you have 2 years from the moment that Article 50 is triggered, where you basically have to renegotiate all your arrangements. If you haven't done it at the end of that time, then everything simply lapses on the spot. Boris wants to slow everything down, some in Europe do as well. But other European leaders are saying, no, Britain has voted to leave, let's just get on with it and get them out of the club, so it may not be completely in Britain's control.
It's not just Scotland, Northern Ireland, it's town, city, country divided after this result.
Yes, and you could argue maybe young versus old as well. I think what struck me is that half the country is on one side of the argument, not just on the in or the outside of the argument, but also almost half the country thinks they've done basically okay out of the system. It's delivered some sort of economic prosperity for them. But half the country clearly believes they've been marginalised. They've been left behind by the system in the way it's operated. And they also, those same people, don't see why they should listen to the establishment, whether it's politicians or institutions like the Bank of England. I think there's a real disconnect there with half the country, with its view of our political leaders, if you like. And I think it's something that whoever is the Prime Minister is going to have to tackle.
Thanks, Andy. Well, when the result of the vote was announced, the immediate reaction from the financial world was also astonishing. Stock markets plunged, the pound fell to its lowest rate against the dollar for more than 30 years. The Bank of England Governor Mark Carney gave reassurances that Britain's economy can cope, but it is likely to push up the cost of everything from mortgages to petrol to our summer holidays. Julian Drucker has more.
The people have spoken, and this is where it's being heard loud and clear. This morning on trading floors across the city, extraordinary, historic and nail-biting times. One of the worst openings in the life of the FTSE, a Brexit bloodbath, which will be felt by millions in the pocket. It is now 8:30. The FTSE has fallen more than 8%. That has wiped £120 billion off the value of the UK's 100 biggest companies. There is a lot of nervous energy in this room. Look at those steep drops in sterling. After traders watched the PM's resignation, the FTSE made a partial recovery, helped in part by the Governor of the Bank of England attempting to calm nerves.
Some market and economic volatility can be expected as this process unfolds. But we are well prepared for this.
So how will the UK's finances affect yours? A sterling slump may be felt at the pump. A possible interest rate cut divides the experts, but it would see mortgage payments lower. Such a cut wouldn't bring cheer to those with savings or on pensions. 24 hours after she voted leave, Mandy at Manchester Airport says she regrets it.
I would go back to the polling station and vote to stay, simply because this morning the reality is actually hitting in and the regrets are filling in of that we have actually left EU. I'm worried about my future job. Hopefully when I finish my studies, is there going to be a job for me at the end?
These are unquestionably unprecedented times, but for how long, uncertain times. Julian Drucker, 5 News.
With me now is business expert Louise Cooper and personal finance expert Jasmine Birtles. Is it right, ladies, that it's going to hit us in the pocket?
Yes, I think it probably will. For the consumer generally, a lot of things are going to be more expensive.
Louise?
Not necessarily, it depends who you are.
Ah, OK. So already a rocky road, though, for business, as we heard, with the FTSE and the pound.
OK, so the FTSE 100 is actually higher than it was a week ago. Admittedly, first thing this morning, the stock market was down 8%, but it's rallied and is now only down about 3%. In terms of sterling, it is right that sterling against the dollar is down 7 to 8%. But that is good news for British exporters because overnight they become a lot more competitive. And against the euro, sterling's only down something like 5 to 6% because the fear is that, of course, if the UK leaves, other countries may follow. So there's a bit of a contagion in the euro.
Jasmine, we buy a lot of things that come into this country.
Yes.
They're imported and they're going to get more expensive, aren't they?
Yes, we're net importers. We import more. We use more things from out of the country than we do that are made in this country. So yeah, it's going to affect all sorts of things. I mean, for starters, it's going to affect oil prices because oil's pegged to the dollar. And as we are doing now badly against the dollar and likely, I think, to do badly against the dollar for quite some time, that'll mean that petrol should go up.
We're hearing maybe 3p a litre by next week?
It's quite possible, who knows? But yes, I think in the medium to longer term, I think generally speaking, we are going to see some difficulties. All sorts of things will come out the woodwork that we didn't even know came from abroad.
Louise, as a whole, the United Kingdom is a country obsessed with houses. The house builders took a hit this morning, so that tells you something. What about the housing market?
OK, so what the markets are pricing in now is rate cuts, not rises, rate cuts from the Bank of England. Something like 0.25% rate cut in the next month. So if you're on a tracker mortgage, you could do very well from this.
Well, let me ask Jasmine, what should people be doing about things that, like their mortgages and loans and pensions at this point in time?
Well, I'd wait and see, frankly, because we are in a time of turbulence. Nobody honestly knows what's going to happen. Yeah, don't panic. And I would say probably don't make any big financial decisions. I mean, a lot of people are putting off buying houses, and they're right to do so, I think, because who knows? It's likely, I think, that the housing market will deflate. How much by, I don't know, which is good news for first-time buyers, not so great if you're hoping to cash in on your home.
But the majority of people have voted for this. They'll be hoping for better times to come. Who's going to be a winner straight away?
Oh, very well.
Those who've got tracker mortgages, by the way, and also the
exporters definitely.
The fall in borrowing costs, what we call gilt yields, actually is good news for mortgages. We've already seen record low costs, interest rates for mortgages. That is likely to go down further. So I'm not necessarily in agreement, because record low mortgages, I think, could actually boost the housing market. No one knows. We are in completely uncharted territory.
Still in uncharted territory, even though the decision has now been made. There are going to be murky waters for quite a while to come, Jasmine.
Yes. Yeah, there's so much to split, there's so much to sort out, so much to negotiate. We've got 2 years. You know, for the next 2 years, we are still technically going to be in the EU. So, you know, we're going to have to be working out what are we going to cut, where are we going to sever, how are we going to renegotiate terms. And there are a whole load of laws that we have to think up again and work out from our point of view.
Last word, Louise.
Big losers, savers, I'm afraid, yet again. When rates are cut, we could get to 0% interest rates. Anyone with savings is yet again going to be hit.
Thank you both very much indeed. As you can imagine, it's been a pretty busy day down here in Westminster. Lots of people come out to have a look at what's going on what has been an historic day with a momentous decision. Lots of politicians and commentators as well coming to terms with what exiting the European Union all means in the coming weeks and months, and as Jasmine said, the coming years as well. I've been speaking to a few of them throughout the afternoon.
You've seen a Prime Minister toppled. You've seen the markets going to melt down. You've seen the Scots, the SNP making clear they're going to go for a second referendum.
New Labour leader, maybe? There's already a vote of confidence on its way to him.
I think certainly there are questions for the Labour Party about how we ran the campaign, the leadership's role.
What do you think, in your opinion, is the most important thing that should happen now to chart what you call a new path?
Well, first of all, we need to calm down, and the markets need to calm down. Nothing's going to happen for at least 2 years whilst the negotiations take place.
New relationships also in your own party, with David Cameron deciding to leave Downing Street. Who should replace him?
Well, my view is Boris Johnson is the man equipped to do that. He was a very effective leader of the Brexit campaign.
I think we have to learn some lessons about the anger and disaffection that many people feel. I think that goes back to the financial crash in 2008. A lot of people feel those who caused the crash got off scot-free and everybody else paid the price. The key priority for me is that working people don't end up paying the price for this Brexit.
What is the one main thing you want to see happen next?
The government tables a bill in the House of Commons that provides for our leaving the European Union and transfers all the existing EU regulation into UK law, so there's complete continuity. There's that carryover clause, but it's under our control. That is the act of taking back control.
Joining me now is Conservative MP and Leave campaigner Peter Bone and Labour MP and Remain campaigner Caroline Flynn. Caroline, a lot of people, well, the majority of people in fact, very happy about this, excited by this. Why shouldn't they be?
Well, clearly, you know, there was a decisive decision last night and I recognise that, and I'm disappointed obviously that Remain didn't win, but I think, you know, what I've heard and what I realise at the end of this campaign very strongly is that we could throw as many facts at the electorate, but the truth is it was feelings that won over facts on the day, and particularly in my area and lots of areas outside of our cities, their feelings and concerns about immigration.
Peter, 16 million people are feeling afraid now at the same time. What would you say to put their mind at ease?
Well, I think this was a great democratic event. I mean, so many people are engaged and arguing, and most people, well, a lot of people, were on a knife edge which way to go. And the fact is, the country's spoken, we'll get on with doing the job, and we'll be in a better place.
Even though you're happy with the result, is it still a step into the unknown?
Oh, well, it's a step into unknown, more to stay in, I would have said, because all we're doing is going back to how we were before we went into the common market. So actually, we for 2,000 years we've run our country pretty well.
That was a long time ago.
Well, I think 43 years ago, and look, we are where we are, and my top priority is how do I make sure that the people I represent in Doncaster don't lose out by any discussions and opportunities lost to get investment in, or any uncertainty that stop that investment coming. But let's be clear, there's a lot of issues to untangle here, and it's going to be a lot of difficult decisions ahead.
Huge number. You're both where you are, still representing your constituencies for the time being. What about your party leaders, though? Peter, I've got to talk to you first, because we know that David Cameron is going. Who should replace him?
Well, he did absolutely the right thing. We need somebody from the Leave side, because they've got to believe in coming out of the EU. That's important. And we need somebody who can walk straight into Downing Street. We need somebody who's got the experience. So it's got to come.
Give me a name.
Oh, there's a series of names. Obviously, Boris could do it.
Give me one of them.
Boris, Liam Fox, David Davis. Somebody like that who's got the experience.
Okay, pick your favourite.
Oh, gosh, I don't know. David Davis.
Vote of confidence being called in your leader, Jeremy Corbyn. What's going to happen to him?
Well, first of all, the reason why we're having the vote of confidence is that we feel that actually Jeremy didn't give the leadership that we needed. He needs to address that failure, because we now have a gulf between Labour voters in somewhere like London and our traditional Labour voters elsewhere.
Yes, he said he gave the EU 7.5 out of 10. That wasn't a ringing endorsement, was it?
Well, you know, it's not surprising that a couple of weeks ago 50% of Labour voters weren't sure what the position of the Labour Party was, but also he didn't address the concerns about immigration in those provincial towns outside of our big cities. And if we are going to win an election, and we could have a general election sooner rather than later with a new Tory leader,
before the end of the year?
I think it's quite possible if at the end of the year or early next year. We have to ask ourselves, how do we bridge that gap that's opened up between our voters in London and elsewhere? And Jeremy has to convince us he can do that. At the moment, he's not doing that.
And bridging the gap inside your own party, which is now, there's a gaping chasm between Leave and Remain there.
I'm not sure about that. I think the party has always been divided on the issue. I think you do want a leader who can unite the party, and somebody from the Leave side, and somebody who can go into Downing Street. And I think that's what will emerge over the next few weeks.
What happened to that tie now, by the way?
Well, I was going to, if you allow me, I'll take it off now and give it to you there, because it's the last time we ever want to wear this tie, because it's done its purpose.
It's kind of
there
you
you
to give
go.
me a souvenir, but I'm not sure I'll ever be wearing it on the street. Thank you very much, Peter and Caroline. Thank you both. Coming up, though, still to come rather on 5 News tonight, we find out what the rest of Europe makes of all that's happened today. And also, what will Brexit mean for your summer holidays abroad? We're discussing that after the break. Welcome back. You're watching a 5 News Tonight special live from Westminster, and world leaders have been giving their reaction to the vote to leave. The German Chancellor Angela Merkel says it is a watershed for Europe, while President Barack Obama says it won't affect our special relationship with the United States. Donald Trump has called it a great thing. Let's go now to Peter Lane, who's live at the EU headquarters in Brussels. And Peter, this will have an impact far beyond the UK. What have people been saying about it?
Well, Matt, this is where the mechanics of the UK's exit will have to be ironed out. But let's be clear, no one knows how that's going to work, because it's never been done before. Now, the EU's figureheads, people like Angela Merkel and Francois Hollande, have expressed their regret today about the decision that's been taken in Britain. And the European Council President, Donald Tusk, has been pondering a new era for the EU.
There's no hiding the fact that we wanted a different outcome of yesterday's referendum. I am fully aware of how serious or even dramatic this moment is politically, and there's no way of predicting all the political consequences of this event, especially for the UK. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Well, Barack Obama today has talked about the strength of the special relationship between the UK and the US. He says that will endure. But the man who wants his job, Donald Trump, has been full of praise for Brexit.
I think it's going to end up being a great thing. And the beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing is your people have taken the country back. And there's something very, very nice about that.
Now here at the EU, they say that the remaining 27 states will stay strong, that they are, quote, bound by history, geography and common interests. And significantly, they said today that they hope to keep the UK as a close partner.
Peter in Brussels, thanks very much indeed. So that's what Europe and the rest of the world thinks of us now. But what does this mean for our holidays abroad as summer is here? The Independent's travel editor Simon Calder is with me. And Simon, you're clutching all the things that we usually take when we go abroad. So how are they going to change? Your passport, your e-hit card, all that kind of stuff?
OK, well, nothing changes at all until we actually leave. So you won't need to go through the non-EU passport queue just yet, although you will do soon. Your passport, which says European Union at the top, that's not going to change. Even if it expires in 8 years' time, it'll still be valid. It's just as soon as we leave, it stops being an EU passport.
Okay.
Poor chap called me today and said, hey, if I get a new passport today, will I be an EU citizen for the next 10 years? I'm afraid no. You need to look for an Irish grandparent if you're going to do that. Driving licence, got a little EU symbol there.
Same thing.
Again, you won't need to get a new one. The e-hit card, that gives us free treatment, or almost free, according to any of the EU countries. That will cease to have any value when we leave, but there will almost certainly be reciprocal agreements. And of course, currency.
The money.
This is worth about maybe 5–10% less than it was today, and you'll get fewer of these and fewer of these.
Interesting, I know you've written today that even if people have booked their holidays abroad already, the price could still go up and they'll have to pay more.
Well, under the package travel regulations, holiday companies can say, look, the cost of providing this holiday has gone up, maybe between 2 to 10%. You've got to pay us more. If it's over 10%, you can say, thanks very much, I'll have a full refund. And of course, if you've booked a trip yourself and you haven't paid for your accommodation yet, and it's priced in euros or dollars or any other foreign currency, that's going to cost you more today than it did yesterday.
Further ahead, Simon, if you want to go to the Costa del Sol for a nice summer break, are you now going to have to go to the Spanish embassy to get a visa?
No, that was one of the more absurd propositions of the Remain campaign. I think that would be ridiculous. Second only to Germany, we export more tourists than any other country in the world. European countries love us going on holiday. They're not going to be putting up any barriers.
Discussed with Louise and Jasmine the weakness of the pound now against, in particular, the dollar and the euro, but that will benefit British tourism, won't it?
Well, in two ways. First of all, it will make Britain cheaper for Americans, for Europeans coming here. Also, it will make abroad more expensive, so we might be prepared to stay at home, have more domestic holidays. Having said that, when the pound completely fell off a cliff in 2008, did we go on holiday less in 2009? Not really.
Just looking a bit further ahead, it's not going to change an awful lot then, you don't think?
Oh, well, I think there could be quite an impact in flights. You saw the big airlines, British Airways down 1/5, Ryanair down 1/7, EasyJet down 18%. That's because the markets say, hey, you make all your money because you're flying within Europe. If there's going to be less of that or you're facing restrictions, that's going to be bad news for the airlines, bad news for the passengers.
Simon, many thanks indeed. So, that is almost it from us. Kirsty has the weather next and Chloe has updates throughout the evening here on Channel 5. It is, though, just the start of the new direction the United Kingdom has chosen and the many repercussions that result from that historic democratic decision. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.